Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. So, everyone is talking about AI these days, but not enough people are taking the time to unpack how AI will impact the future of higher education. And that's why we launched the Generation AI podcast, co hosted by Artis Cadu, CEO of Element 451, and JC Bonilla, Chief Data Officer at VaynerMedia. Artis and JC have worked on large language models for nearly 2 decades and have remarkable technical knowledge around how they work and how generative AI will impact the future of higher ed. Generation AI isn't just about understanding artificial intelligence, it's about being part of the AI revolution in education. Tune in, get informed, and be inspired to innovate in your educational space with the power of artificial intelligence. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Generation AI wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. I have a disability. That is something it has taken me a long time to feel comfortable saying. I was diagnosed with my condition, which I'm going to talk about in this episode, in 2019. And I have not actually shared my diagnosis with any employers that I've had since I received the diagnosis. I have, in part, been afraid to do so because I've heard from friends and colleagues who have had less than empathetic responses to their requests for accommodations for their disabilities. I think that's a true shame because there is a lot that people with disabilities bring to the table, and we have a lot of value to our organizations. And sometimes accommodations can be really minor and simple and just require the tiniest little bit of empathy from those who lead us. For this episode, I wanted to bring on somebody who could talk about the experiences that he's had throughout his entire career dealing with a rather devastating disability, cystic fibrosis. And so I'm really, really honored that RJ Thompson was willing to come on and share his story for this episode. Hopefully, you walk away from this feeling empowered to do what you can to be a better ally and advocate for those who work with you and for you who may have disabilities. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, a podcast that empowers higher ed marketers to bring innovation, creativity, and excellence to their work. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher educational professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm so happy to be here with RJ Thompson, who is the Manager of Digital Strategy at Pitt Health Sciences. RJ, how are you today?
I am fantastic.
Awesome. It's a Monday when we're recording, so that's kind of a feat, I feel like.
I'm not lying. I'm great.
Good. Me too. Somebody said I was in a suspiciously good mood today, so we'll see about that. So RJ, we're here to talk a little bit about working with a disability in higher ed. But before we jump right into that topic, can you tell us a little bit about your higher ed journey?
My higher ed journey actually started on the faculty side. I started teaching at 24 years old.
Wow.
I became an adjunct professor at a local Catholic school here in Pittsburgh, and then shortly after that, I was, I guess, promoted, if you will, to become a visiting professor. And then a year later, I was teaching graphic design at Carnegie Mellon University. as a 25-year-old, which is insane.
Right.
And then from there, I went to a few other schools, eventually landed at Youngstown State University in Ohio. And I was at Youngstown State until 2019, when I decided to sort of leave the full-time tenure track teaching in favor of some greener pastures. The entire time I've been teaching, I was teaching graphic design, interactive design, and creative problem solving.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm still on the faculty side. I adjunct teach at the University of Pittsburgh College of Business Administration, teaching marketing and advertising. I teach graphic design still at two other Pittsburgh universities. And most recently, I joined the Integrated Marketing Communications master's degree at WVU, teaching digital storytelling and graphic design.
And we're going to be colleagues in the fall because I'll also
That's
be
right.
teaching in that program. I'm so excited.
Yes. Yes.
It's going to be awesome. I think it's really interesting, and there's probably a whole podcast about why you left a tenure track position for, as you described them, greener pastures. And I think we talked about that maybe a year or so ago. But
Mhm.
but since that's not the focus of this podcast, maybe we'll have to have you on to talk about that. But for the purpose of this podcast, I know a little bit about your disability, but can you tell the audience a little bit about it?
At least for me, I consider what I have to be an invisible disability. On the surface, on the outside, I look completely normal, but on the inside, there's all kinds of chaos happening. I was born with a genetic disease called cystic fibrosis. This was 1985, and 4 months into my life, I was nearing the end of it. And they had discovered at 4 months old that I had cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease, but it affects the respiratory, digestive, and reproductive systems of a person's body. Cystic fibrosis is also mostly known as a child killing disease. So I'm very fortunate and blessed that I'm at 39 and thriving, because there was a point in time where I wasn't going to live to see a year old. And so with cystic fibrosis, it presents itself differently in each person that has the illness. I could meet a 75-year-old person with cystic fibrosis tomorrow that barely has it. Or I can meet a child that is so profoundly affected by the disease that their outlook is grim. I've seen the whole spectrum. I've had friends with cystic fibrosis that have passed. I'm sure we'll get into how layered that is, but the survivor's guilt that I've handled has been really challenging. Nevertheless, imagine, if you will, you have a cold, right? Your nose is sniffly, it's blocked, and maybe if you have a lung infection, you're coughing stuff out. Yeah, pretty gross, right? That's every day of my life. Every couple months for, I don't know, the past 35 years, I would have some kind of lung infection where I'm coughing stuff out of my lungs. And essentially, one of the problems with cystic fibrosis is that there is a translation issue with water across the cells. And so with me, my body produces all of this excess mucus, and it lives in my lungs. And the longer that mucus lives in your lungs, the more susceptible you are to lung infections. And so, growing up, it was hard. Like, I was having these lung infections, coughing stuff up all the time. It made growing up in general difficult. It made social situations difficult, but that's just the respiratory side of it. On top of all of the other inhaled medications that I'd have to take, I also have a digestive system issue related to the disease where my body does not break down fat.
Mm.
So I have to take pancreatic enzymes, which are actually sourced from pigs. Every time I eat fat, I have to take these pancreatic enzymes, and that would allow me to get the nourishment from the food. Had I not had pancreatic enzymes, I could eat and eat and eat and eat, but wouldn't get anything from it. And that's a really twisted way of starving to death. And at 4 months old, that's what was happening.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the last part to this is the reproductive issues, in that most people with CF are infertile across both genders. And fortunately, with technology like IVF, we can get around that. But then that also brings into other considerations, like I have this disease, it's genetic. Is it ethical to like pass it on? And
Yeah.
so there are a number of questions related to that are always kind of popping up. And
Yeah.
so that's cystic fibrosis in general. And I feel very blessed again for the state of my health. I've known others that have passed from the disease, but I will tell you one thing, and I think this is maybe writ large for a lot of people, if not many people, with obvious disabilities or invisible disabilities. I have never met people that are more courageous than to keep moving on and doing their thing despite what they're dealing with. I am as ever intrigued, but no more astounded at those types of people.
I'm sitting here feeling sorry for myself while I have allergies and realizing like that's your everyday. I also have an invisible disability, and just for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to kind of share what that is so that we can have kind of a common foundation to talk from, and for listeners to understand. So I have Sjogren's syndrome, a primary Sjogren's syndrome with secondary palindromic arthritis. And so, what that can mean, some of the symptoms that a person with those can experience, almost 100% of us experience dry eyes, which can lead to corneal ulcerations and infections. We generally are not advised to wear contact lenses, for example, because we can easily scratch our corneas. Dry nose, which can lead to recurring sinus infections, recurring nosebleeds. Dry mouth, which often leads to tooth decay, because your saliva is very, very important for aiding in the digestion of your food. And it can lead to difficulty with chewing, speech, taste, potentially wearing dentures in the future. For me, it definitely causes problems with chewing and sometimes speech, difficulty with swallowing, heartburn problems, chronic fatigue, um, recurrent pneumonia, bronchitis, widespread joint and muscle pain. It can cause liver damage, autoimmune hepatitis, peripheral neuropathy, which is losing sensation in your fingers and toes, irritable bowel syndrome, and also some reproductive challenges. It's generally not a death sentence for people who have Sjogren's syndrome. It is not curable, it is treatable. I'm very fortunate right now to have found an amazing doctor that has some really great treatments, and I'm in a very good place. It took a while to get here, but right now I'm in a very, very good place with where I am. But it is one of those things where, oh, I don't think I mentioned the brain fog. You can have brain fog, and um, I'll say that for me, the biggest impact career wise has been that fatigue, because there will be times when it's uh, all but impossible to physically move, and that again has been under control for a while now. But I think to me, that's part of why I'm a big advocate for allowing for remote work, because I can make it up the stairs to my home office in those situations. But the notion of trying to make that 30-minute commute, it's just sometimes it's just too much. But that kind of brings me to my question for you is, how open with your employers have you been with um, your cystic fibrosis and the accommodations that you need for it?
I've been perhaps too open about it. I had been told repeatedly, like, don't tell a prospective employer about your condition. And I never appreciated that advice. I know why, on a technical and legal level, why that is important. And I encourage others to follow it. But for me, it's not a part of my story. It's not who I am. The conditions through which I've experienced this illness have also brought me to this destination.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't love cystic fibrosis by any means, but through the course of my life, it has brought me to where, not only where I am now, but where I want to be and where I want to go. Like I said, I'm not done. I talk about all of the things that I go through, like not in a job interview by any means, but like I talk about being an advocate for CF and talking with parents and families and politicians and raising money, and how all of that has helped shaped my lived experience. And if an employer doesn't appreciate that, then that's not someone I want to work with ever.
I would
Um,
agree.
and, there have been circumstances where I've interviewed somewhere. I was a perfect fit for the job, but they didn't like that I openly said this. Like, basically, they're concerned, like, oh man, this guy's got an illness. Like, he shouldn't have told us. Now we're compromised if we don't hire him. And, that's their problem, not mine. But even like when I was on the teaching side, a lot of my professional work was in pursuit of fundraising for CF, or service to the community was with this community. So it's a part of who I am, and I'm pleased to say that in nearly all aspects of higher education, I have received support.
That's fantastic.
Doesn't necessarily mean there's understanding, but there is
Right.
at least support.
I would hope that higher ed would be better than some industries. I think I have not been open. Honestly, this podcast is the most open I've been about, my invisible disability. And I was going through the journey while I was at one institution and had a ton of support there because the leadership there knew sort of the symptoms that I was experiencing and how troubling they were and the challenges I was having while I was trying to get everything under control. Um, but I have going to be very honest. I have always doubted that I would get the support that I need for um, the accommodations that would be ideal for me. And some of those would include being able to work from home on those days when either the pain is too strong or the fatigue is too strong. Having fully remote opportunities, I think, um, are just fairly non-existent at the VP level in
Hmm.
higher education, which is it's funny because it exists at some of our largest and most successful companies in the world, but not at our institutions of higher education for some reason. And I think that that's something that I would like to see change because I think I have a lot to offer an institution.
Hmm.
And having the ability to primarily work from home would be of such benefit to me, which I have gone into work 5 days a week for the past 3 years since the pandemic and have made it work. But I think it would just make things a little bit easier. But I have a lot of reluctance because I'm very concerned about being perceived as having a weakness or being
Hmm.
perceived if I, something goes awry or something, blaming it on the disability or blaming it on me because I have a disability or something like that. And I feel like there are people out there, there are unethical people out there who would weaponize a person's disability. And I've seen it happen to others, to friends. And
Hmm.
it just makes me very anxious about it. And I admire that you've been so open in your job searches even.
Well, thank you. And everything that you just said is absolutely a concern for myself as well. Not necessarily here at the University of Pittsburgh by any means, but I would say in general for all of our brothers and sisters that have some type of disability, invisible or otherwise. We crossed the Rubicon with
Yeah.
the pandemic, and everyone has something now. I feel like the pandemic really put an extra focal point on health
Yeah.
for everybody in general, and also created points of exposure to illnesses that were not taken as seriously, and has brought that to the fore. And I'm excited for that because these are conversations that we should be having, but also these are things that we should be accepting. What you told me frustrates me because like I'm able to separate the two, and I'm like, I don't care what's wrong with Jaime so long as we are meeting or exceeding our business objectives. If we are prospering, something's working.
Right.
And let's understand also why it's happening. When that alignment happens, one of the things that is driving it is empathy.
100%.
Empathy is driving
100%.
it.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news. I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jaime Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
And for people that don't recognize that, they're never going to recognize it. They're never going to see it, even if it hits them in the face. And it is to their detriment, because they would just as rather let you or I go and deal with the fallout than to empathize.
It's really sad. It's really sad, and it's really heartbreaking, and we're missing out on a lot of talented people in the workplace as a result of it.
Mhm.
And I think, there's a lot of, COVID conspiracy theories, and I'm not interested in attracting that audience to this podcast. But
Right.
I do think we know that long COVID is been recognized as a scientific reality, and
Mhm.
it has been I've seen it described as a mass disabilitization. I don't know if that's a word,
Yeah.
but a event that has caused a massive number of disabilities with long COVID. And I think there's probably a greater awareness of, okay, not everybody is fine. Like,
Mhm.
not everybody is healthy. And
Yeah.
what can we as leaders do to help people still be able to be contributors to the workforce and still able to bring their valuable contributions to the workforce, despite maybe not being physically well?
Mhm.
And what advice would you have for leaders that to better support their staff who may have disabilities, visible or otherwise?
I'm going to bring it full circle back to empathizing. I don't need to know what's wrong necessarily. I don't need the details. But I have a lived experience of having to be my own advocate and how hard and heartbreaking that can be. So it costs me nothing to be open, to be empathetic, and to be proactive.
Mm,
So for leaders in my position or higher positions, all you have to do is just be open and be empathetic and being willing to do what is best for the person. Because here's the thing, like, if you are a leader and you find yourself in a situation with an employee that their situation is causing disruption, regardless of the level of disruption, it's causing disruption, right? You have the choice. You can be a good leader and do what's best for the business, or you could be a good person. And being a good person, to me, is also a part of being a good leader. You can
yes.
be a good leader and be an absolutely terrible person.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what do you want to be? And if you want to be a good person, you're going to find that that person that you're working with that is having the issue, if you can empathize with them, if you can work with them, they're going to respect you for it. They're going to work harder for you.
100%.
They are going to be more dedicated to your vision. It's a rising tide lifts all ships, and it costs you nothing. If you're in a situation where the bottom line business objectives are so cutthroat that you have to treat people as anything less than, that is a cultural issue that needs changed. And if you're a good leader, you may want to tell your people to I'm not sticking around, or you may want to find something else to do. And that's the human thing about it. That's just being a good person. Um, with my team, I work with a lot of people that have varying disabilities, invisible or otherwise, and I put my story out there, and I tell them just like I'm talking with you. Here's my story. Take it or leave it. But at the end of the day, what I want you to know is that whatever's wrong with you, I will unconditionally believe you.
Mm,
I will unconditionally support you where and when and however I can. And, if it makes me look like a fool, so be it. I would rather look like a fool and do a good thing for the right reasons than to look smart and do everything for the wrong reason. At the end of the day, it comes down to my people. And in some cases, like, that helps me grow. I learn about them as people, about their interests. I learn about their situations.
mm,
And that helps me develop new opportunities for them, professional opportunities. But again, bringing it back right to the human condition. One of my coworkers has ADHD. She's amazing, and I want to work with her the rest of my life. We're in lockstep. Fantastic. My daughter has ADHD. She's able to teach me things that I can apply at home, and I'm able to take what I learn at home and bring it back. And now, what has been made? A community.
yeah.
And it's such a beautiful thing to actually have that. And when my daughter gets a little bit older, she's going to be able to talk to my coworker about her challenges, and they're going to be able to work together and find affinity and camaraderie. And for a long period of time with my daughter, I was concerned that, like, am I doing parenting wrong? I'm neurotypical. Am I doing this wrong? And I feel like I could cry because it has been just such a wave of relief finding this person on my team that can tell me, like, you're doing everything okay, you're doing the best you can. And so that exchange is reciprocal. That
Yeah.
human condition is reciprocal, and it costs neither of us anything.
It's almost like we're whole human beings. We're not just work selves, home selves. It's like, boy, what a innovative thought that we're full integrated human beings. But you make me think about even employees that have children or family members with
Hmm.
disabilities or with challenges. I had somebody on my team, and I'm going to not use gender or indicate what institution I was at, but this individual had a child who had attempted suicide. I was immediately like, take all the time that you need, first of all. And when you are ready to come back, I want you to work from home for as long as you feel like you need to, so that you're there. You're physically
Hmm.
there for your child, because we're talking about life and death here, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about your child could die. And when you talked about like that, and that you get that person's commitment to you through behaving like a human, a decent human being, I think that that person would to this day take a bullet for me.
Hmm.
They became so invested in me as their leader, so appreciative, which is so sad because I was
Yeah.
doing what I felt like was basic human decency, right? But at having that recognition of your staff as being whole human beings that have messy and complicated lives when they go home and when they're not at work, but that's not a switch. We're not in the TV show Severance, where when you walk into the
Right.
building, you're in at work and it's just work. And I used to pride myself on being able to compartmentalize and saying like, oh, when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I'm at home, I'm at home. But that's not the reality of life. Like, that's not how things are. And I would rather any day of the week be a good person than the way you defined a quote unquote good leader. I would rather, honestly, like, if at the end of the day more people cry than applaud when I die, then then I've done something right, right? Like, I don't want anybody to be like, "Woo, Jamie's dead. This is the best thing ever." Um, and even when I've had to like terminate people,
Hmm.
doing that with empathy and care and recognizing the ickiness of it, and that it's horrible for them to hear, and
Hmm.
that you still care about them as a person. I've had people thank me for terminating them. Like, after, like, because you're treating people like human beings, and this shouldn't be
Yep.
rocket scientists. And yet, so I hear from so many people that they're not in that type of space. And I'm grateful that you have been able to find employers where you're able to not only receive that, but also
Hmm.
give that to your staff, because sometimes there's pressure not to. I have not um, been in a situation where I've been told, like, oh, this person's daughter is suicidal. Well, they haven't been here long enough to get FMLA, so
Hmm.
I guess they're going to have to quit to take care of her. I'm lucky that I have not had that pressure, but I have friends who have had that, and it just makes me sad.
Yeah. And, that's probably a job that they wouldn't have wanted or stayed in anyway.
No.
I will say that also, I'm in the health sciences at Pitt. I'm in the School of Medicine. It would look very hypocritical, to have a negative attitude towards anything related to illnesses and health, considering where I'm at. Fortunately, that is clearly not the case, and they celebrate my diversity and that of others as well. Diversity is like one of, if not the biggest pillar here, because health is diverse, and so
Yeah.
too are all of the spectrum of illnesses within it. And the health sciences mission here is also undergirded by the Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm.
Yeah.
And so there is strong philosophy, there's principled philosophy that undergirds the operation of this organization. And in the study I did recently, not only they did my superiors here applaud my efforts in participating in this human trial, they cleared the path.
That's
They're like,
awesome.
we want you to do this.
That's awesome. At the first university I worked for, which was a natural health care university, there was somebody on the team who had macular degeneration, and they had the opportunity to participate in, I don't think it was a study because they were going to have to pay. It was like an experimental treatment or something, and they were going to have to pay $10,000 for that treatment. And they were having some problems getting into it. And the president made phone calls to get them in. And then when the bill came, I'm actually a little choked up. When the bill came, um, the person that was in that treatment got a zero balance bill because the president had paid for it out of his own pocket. And that's the kind of person I want to be. I
Mhm.
want to be somebody
Absolutely.
who's like, I'm going to make this happen for somebody and
Hmm.
to take away that stress. And what a
That's a
gift.
that is a gift indeed. That is so amazing. And yeah, we would all be just a, a little bit better if that attitude was more prevalent and widespread.
Yeah. He was he was a wonderful man, the leader of that institution. Just a wonderful, kind man. Uh, but I was thinking about when you were talking about, working for places, I'm sure you saw a couple months ago that woman who was fired after her newborn son was in NICU,
Hmm.
at Kite Baby, because she wanted to work remotely from her baby's hospital bed. And her employer said, no, sorry, you can quit or you can come back into the office, and forced her to quit. And it's like the values of our organizations need to be such that that does not happen. But if it does, I feel like everybody who worked there should have walked away. Everybody who had the
Yes.
financial ability to walk away from them should have walked away.
Well, who's next?
Right.
If they treated that person that way, then no one's safe.
I'm curious about like other countries, particularly, I have Scandinavian ancestry, so I'm like always looking at what's Sweden up to these days, because it seems
Hmm.
to be a great place to live. But other countries seem to have prioritized humanity above
Hmm.
capitalism more than we have. And I'm not going to turn this podcast. Do you know how much hate I'm going to get if like I get on the wrong side of the internet with this podcast? Like I've got the COVID deniers, and I'll get the people who are rabid about capitalism, but I
Blame it
just,
on me.
yeah. It's RJ. Are there any final pieces of advice that you would give to educators, administrators, leaders about supporting colleagues with disabilities?
Yes, from the educational perspective, having been in the classroom for so long, I'm finishing my 15th year in the classroom this semester, and when ever since the pandemic, I have seen a massive uptick in undiagnosed learning disabilities,
Mm.
undiagnosed mental health challenges, ranging from severe anxiety to suicidal thoughts to even literacy issues. It's like every student has something wrong, and I'm not complaining, but one of the things that I did was, in noticing this, I made it a point to invest in learning about these different types of things and how to spot them.
Mm.
At all the universities I teach at, I feel like, oh, I'm in the disabilities office. Thompson's calling me. Just another day. But the thing is, like, I know what it's like to not have an advocate. I know what it's like to be my own advocate. So many of these students, whatever level they're at, associate, bachelor's, master's, whatever, they do not have advocates.
Mm.
They don't even know they need to advocate for themselves. So when I spot a learning disability, or I spot, someone with troubling illness or whatever, I beeline them straight to disability services.
Good for you.
And I help walk them through that process as much as I can without violating FERPA or being involved any deeper than I have to. If they want to self-identify and come clean about that stuff, totally fine. I will listen every day of the week. But just getting them to the door to that office to understand how to protect themselves, because I have so many students that if they knew what was wrong with them, they would be thriving.
Mm.
But
Yes.
instead, they don't know what's happening, and they are working at a quarter of their potential. I can stomach a lot. I can't abide waste. I can't abide wasted talent. And so it's important for me to be able to spot those things, do early intervention, and get them to the right people so that they are protected. Because I've seen students fail a class because their ADHD was out of control and they didn't even know they had ADHD, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever else. So, taking that same mentality as a manager, as a leader in a staff unit in higher ed, transfer that, from the classroom to the staff, and it's the same thing. I see a lot of staff at different universities throughout my career have the same issues. It's been like an all-time high in terms of adults being diagnosed with ADHD, because that was something that they didn't even test for.
Right.
And now it's just blowing up, and that's fantastic. People are getting medications that they need. They're thriving. They're making great work. It doesn't stifle their creativity whatsoever. So taking that learning, applying it to the staff, being a human, and giving them the opportunity and time that they need in whatever timeline it is to make those adjustments, to be self-empowered and proactive, to get through whatever they're going through. It helped my students raise their grades. It helped them pass the class. It helped them graduate. It helped them get jobs. Same thing with the staff. They'll see better outcomes. They'll express themselves in more interesting ways, express their professional capabilities in new ways. Rising tide lifts all boats, and it costs nothing. And so I would recommend folks take some time, especially if you're in a leadership position, to learn about these things. You may find you have something undiagnosed.
Right. I'm sure there's tons of people. I wanna plus one that. I had a team member who was just struggling with focus and struggling with, like, attention to detail and
Mhm.
it was just massive struggling, and the other team members were being really impacted by it, and they were like, "You need to get rid of this person." I sat them down and explained what I observed, and they took it to heart and went and they got tested, and had ADHD, and
Mhm.
they got medicated, and it was like a different human being, and they said they felt like so much better after that. And if I hadn't said anything and just moved them on, or just said, we all have to live with the fact that this person's kind of chaotic or whatever, they may have never known, and they wouldn't have been able to be their full potential. And that's heartbreaking. I'm 100% with you. I hate waste. I hate that.
So even like in that context, or in my daughter's context, when she got put on ADHD medication, it was like she was a completely different person.
Yeah.
And so like whatever people are going through is exacerbated by the amount of stress being placed on them, not just from the workplace, but from other people in the workplace that are not empathizing. So they
Yeah.
have like double the amount of stress. And so, trying to eliminate that stress, you're going to see better outcomes. And, when my daughter got her ADHD meds, uh, I asked her what it was like, and she's just like, it's quiet.
Wow.
And that was so profound for me because, it was just like moving her brain, her synapses were moving at like 10,000 miles a minute. And that is stressful to me, you know, so being able to reduce that amount of stress on a professional who's having these challenges, take that stress off of them, give them the opportunity to make some corrections, and then slowly ease them back into what they were doing. You did the right thing, and I'm glad that person is doing great.
Yeah. Just a complete transformation for the better. And in their life, because they said it had been impacting other areas of their life, of course. So fantastic. This has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you if they want to chat with you?
I'm everywhere and nowhere all at once. No,
You're in the metaverse.
I am floating in the metaverse. So you can find me on LinkedIn. That would probably be the best place to start. I am also really active just via email. You can find my email information on my LinkedIn profile. That's the best place to start. I've kind of tapered off a bit from social media, especially X,
Yeah.
because for obvious reasons. But I'm finding that I want people to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then I'll just say, here's my phone number. Let's just talk.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to text, that's fine, but like, attack me where I live on my phone. Call
Right.
me, let's chat. I'm probably floating around out there somewhere else too.
Listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. I am not really I haven't posted on X in months, so don't even bother looking for me there. I am on TikTok also as the Higher Ed CMO. And I always love hearing from folks. And like RJ, usually I'm like, let's just get a Zoom together or something. Let's just have a call. As always, guys, let's always try to be better people than we were yesterday. Let's always do the right thing, and let's go bust some silos. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.